Can you guys hear us on Zoom very well? Good, okay.
Do we want a little louder volume from their end? Do you want me to?
I don't know.
Can somebody talk from Zoom land?
Hello.
Thank you, Akil from Zoom land, yeah.
You sound so excited, Akil.
I'm a little bit under the weather, so
Oh,
Yeah.
that's not good.
yeah.
Sorry
that's
about that.
Thanks, Kim, that's better. Okay, it is 3:01 and I am calling this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. This is our November 9 meeting. Kim is counting to make sure, I think we have a quorum with when you add in people online. Yes, okay. I need an approval of the agenda, please.
I'm so moved.
Moved by Kathy, seconded by?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Joy. Thank you very much. That brings us to 2.03, which is our new Academic Senate Community Values. If you look there, you'll see that they're there. I thank everyone for helping us perfect those. And I look forward to us really using those for the best Senate meetings we can have with the most voices. And that moves us to number 3, public comment. Is there any public comment? Akil.
Hello. I just wanted to say thanks for inviting me into the space. I think it's 3 minutes, right? I shouldn't be that long. I just wanted to say thank you to Academic Senate on behalf of BFSA for ranking the Umoja position second on the list. It was the right thing to do. And so I just wanted to say thank you guys once again for being or standing with Black student success on campus. But there's a couple things I just want to say, make no mistake, we still have a lot of work that we have to do. Make no mistake about it. The position that was put forth, it was the right thing to do. We have a lot of work that we still need to do at this institution. For the people who spoke out against the position, that try to stonewall the position, that filed grievances about the position, we need that same energy for Black student success at Santa Barbara City College. We need that same energy, that same vigor, that same dedication. We need that for Black student success on this campus. We know what the data shows us. It's not a secret anymore. So I hope that we can begin to build off this position and look forward to having Black student success and move the needle in that regards. It's going to take a entire campus effort to do this. It's not a Black Faculty and Staff Association's responsibility. We are committed to this work and we expect everyone that's employed by Santa Barbara City College to be committed to the work. I'm an eternal optimist. I believe that we can do it. I believe we have great minds here at this institution. So I'm looking forward to being on the other side of the track and looking back and saying, look, remember how we once were. So I believe in all of us. I wish everyone the most success in their jobs, but we got a lot of work we got to do. And the last thing I'll say in regards to the allies who spoke, we need allies in the space. We need allies in the space. We need, it's not enough for us to come and speak on behalf of Black students. We need everyone in this space, making Black students feel welcome, safe, and secure. So I'm looking forward to seeing all the allies in those spaces of Umoja and continuing to build upon great things. And lastly, in regards to making our campus a campus of belonging, a safe space, we have to mirror that behavior ourselves. So we have to find a way to work through this in a way that leaves people their dignity and that type of thing. So I'm not going to take up too much. I just want to say thank you for ranking it the Dean's List #2. looking forward to rolling up our sleeves, doing the good work, and moving this needles and metrics for Black student success at Santa Barbara City College. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Akil. Is there any other one for public comment? One. All right. Thanks very much, Akil, again. That brings us to number 4, which is the approval of our minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. Thank you to Margarita for producing those. The first of the minutes from 10/19/22. I know that this was everyone's favorite weekend reading. Yes,
See Ellen Pan.
Ellen?
Yeah, I had a question. I haven't seen the minutes from the 10/12 meeting. So I just wanted to check on the status of the minutes from that meeting.
What was wrong the last agenda?
That kind of thing. Sorry.
Thanks, Ellen. We'll check on that. Do you have anyone have any corrections to the 10/19? Right, seeing no corrections, we will accept those as distributed. How about the 10/26 minutes? Nope. Okay, all right. Seeing no corrections to that, we will approve those as distributed. Okay. That brings us to item number 5, which are information items. And it's pretty exciting to say this. This has been on our list for quite some time. Margarita, can you do some zooming? Margarita is not only taking minutes, but also becoming a cinematographer for us. Our Zoom cinematographer. Thank you for that, Margarita. So you've seen the race lighting webinar information on our agendas for quite some time now. And there's someone who's in the front nodding, who knows something about this, a lot about this. We have Dr. Frank Harris III with us today. And I think you said that you would be able to answer some questions if people have some about race lighting when we get to your part.
Yeah,
Okay.
of course.
And then you can also see everyone that we also have the link there if you want to register. The next one is tomorrow. You'll see that there's just an item of information there about a membership change in the Strategic Enrollment Management Committee. And then there's again, just because who doesn't, I just really, this makes me so happy to get to put the list of the 18 approved positions. So that's our third item there. And put down on alphabetically, which I also like too. All right. Okay, so that moves us on to the reports. You'll see that we updated the liaison report. I'm sorry that was late. We wanted to get you the most recent information you could get. So we've got a meeting that even happened yesterday that's on
5 p.m.
5 p.m.
Yeah.
5 p.m. Joy got in those liaison minutes. So please take a look at those. And then also my president's report, I just want to say that the American Sign Language program was nominated for exemplary program, and that has been sent up to the state level. So we'll see how we do with that. A huge shout out to the Faculty Recognition Committee and also to ASL for having such a great program. Yeah. Okay. All right. Just whipping through this agenda today, everyone. Okay. That brings us to number 7, our discussion and possible action item, which is the calendar for 2023-24. And you'll see that this is basically the 22-23 calendar that's been rolled. The days are off just by a few days, given the calendar moving, but nothing else has changed. There's the same 10-week summer session, which begins for us this year. So any discussion about that?
Can we move that to action or take action on it?
We can certainly move that to action.
I'd like to make a motion that we move this to action.
All right.
Jen has a question.
Oh, Jen, sorry, Jen.
No, sorry, I was a little too slow to get my hand raised. So is this here just like, we're not really supposed to be discussing any of this or
Yeah.
We can
formality at this point.
We can discuss, this was sent to us by the Vice President of Academic Affairs for consideration.
I have two questions. Well, first of all, week is spelled with 3 E's in both places where the 10-week summer term begins.
That's such a long.
So there's that one thing.
All right,
And that's in both 2023 and 2024. Just a couple of questions, and I know this issue has been hashed out in the Senate and the CPC and the board. With respect to any kind of limitations on what we could schedule in these 10-week summer sessions, if we could do overlapping 6-week sessions, do you know where those guidelines are with the new 10-week summer session policies and TLU guidelines and things like that?
TLUs were set.
So I can speak to the TLU limitations for faculty to teach. I do not have any guidelines for scheduling because that's not a faculty association matter. So the idea was that faculty would not lose earning opportunities with the new design of the summer session compared to previous years. And we have an MOU for this. I would have to look up the details. So my suggestion is I email the link to all of you. But the goal was accomplished that the FA went out to, that you are able to teach in the now kind of like merged, unified summer session version, the same 20 TLUs that you have been able to like teach in the 2 separate ones of 10 and 10.
Okay, thank you, Cornelia, for answering that. And yeah, if you could send a link, if you have it, to that would be helpful. I can send it to the people in our division.
And I know department chairs were told that they really hope that we start, or like the course either begins at the beginning or ends at the end as far as our scheduling. So that will, it has to do, thank you, sir. It has to do that. So that's what we do know.
Right, and there was a model of 6 weeks and 6 weeks with an overlap in between, and that is still an okay thing as long as one starts at the beginning and the other one ends at the end, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
do we know why that is, Karen? Scheduling. Okay, apparently that oddity is a scheduling thing. We'll see. If you want to know more about that, I can find out for you.
It'd be good for Jens maybe to come and talk to us.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you, Jen, for those questions. And I did love the point that week with 3 E's clearly proves the schedule is rolled. Right? We'll see how long this persists. All right. So
I'll still make a motion to move this to action. It died before due to a lack of a second. Does anybody care to second that?
Kim is seconding that. All right. Do we want to do a roll call vote for moving it to action? Or are we happy to simply raise our hands if we don't want to move it to action?
I like to ask for any abstentions or no's. That's
Right.
like a faster way to do it. Then you know everybody else is for it. How about that?
Okay, good idea. Any abstentions or no's to moving this to action?
Okay, so
Right. Seeing no abstentions or no's, it's now moved to action. That means that we can now debate it if we would like. Or
have a motion.
we could have a
debate. So I move to approve this calendar with the correction of the typo. I'll second.
Right, so the motion on the floor is to correct the typo and vote on the calendar to approve it.
The reason that I felt we might as well go ahead and approve it is we don't really have any reason not to, because we haven't lived through this calendar yet. So I think next year when we have the calendar on our agenda, we might
want to have more discussion after we've been through a 10-week summer to see how it works. But right now, we don't really have any experience to like it or not like it, except knowing that it's going to be a challenge. So that was the reason. Thank you.
Yeah, good note, to come back and consider that next year. All right, so now we're going to vote, and this will be a roll call vote. All right, Sabrina.
Yeah.
Ellen,
Yes.
Tara.
Yeah.
Juan,
Yes.
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Jess.
Yeah.
Anna,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
welcome back, Russell, by the way.
Good to be back.
Dee.
Yeah.
Chris,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Trisha. Right, Trisha's not here yet. Kim,
Yeah.
Ruth,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
and Ben.
Yes.
All right, so moves and approved. Thank you, everyone. All right, and that brings us to 8, presentation by Dr. Frank Harris III.
All
Well,
right. Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Colleagues on Zoom, can you hear me? Yeah, so I'm happy to be here. For those who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting and interacting with, I'm Frank Harris III. My day job, so to speak, is professor of post-secondary education at San Diego State University. I've been a professor there for 16 years. And my work there focuses on community college equity and student success, primarily focusing on students who've been historically underrepresented and underserved in education. And my work is focused on community college students because that's when we talk about, you know, students of color, students with disabilities, adult learners, students who haven't always had equitable access to higher education. Community colleges are, you know, more often than not, where those students begin their post-secondary careers. And so that's why my work and the work of my colleague, Dr. Jaleel Wood, is focused, you know, specifically on this context. A lot of my work also takes me away from SDSU and brings me to places like Santa Barbara City College, to work with colleagues, to have dialogue with colleagues, to help bring an outsider's perspective to issues that may be challenging the college or issues that maybe require, you know, some strategic thinking to unpack and sort out as it relates to institutionalizing equity. In addition to Santa Barbara City College, I've literally worked with probably about half the colleges in the state of California.
Wow.
In one way or another, right? Either more prolonged engagements like this one, or, you know, doing some professional learning and things like that, and, you know, quite a few colleges outside of the state. So this is work I'm deeply committed to. Some folks ask, did you ever attend a community college? I never had the pleasure of attending a community college, but I did teach as an adjunct faculty member at LA Trade Tech College in the early 2000s. My area was speech communication. I taught on Thursdays from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Yeah. If you're familiar with LA Trade Tech, is in the middle of downtown LA. You know, and it has historically served a population that hasn't, you know, always been well served. You know, strong CTE sort of continuing focus there as well. And so I often say, you know, everything that I learned about the equity, I learned as an adjunct at LA Trade Tech. And I would say in some ways, not always, but in some ways, the experience of being, you know, an adjunct faculty member, in some ways mirrors what our students experience, right? When it comes to, you know, being at a place, but not always feeling a sense of belonging, or not always feeling well served, or not always feeling like you're visible and included. And so I think that's where, you know, sort of the experiences intersect for me. And so in preparing for today, there were 3 things that Melanie and I talked about. I understand that this body, the Senate, there were two things, 2 possible discussion topics, I guess we'll call them that one that's focused on, the format, the best format to deliver courses in ways that are meet student needs in an equitable way, so face-to-face, hybrid, online. The second issue was around masking. How do we deal with when there's an impasse, right? When there's a mandate, but there's different varying perspectives on that mandate. And sometimes perspectives that might impact enrollment or perspectives that might impact relationships between colleagues and so forth. And then the third thing is the race lighting content, if anybody kind of wants to talk a little bit about that. Before I turn it over to questions, I want to give, Professor Hill a big shout out. I was, just being able to hear you articulate why a Umoja position is really important for Black students. I don't know the exact experiences, what it's like here for Black students, but if it's like a lot of other places I've had the opportunity to work, it's a challenging experience. And Umoja, I know is a community that really provides a safe space and an opportunity for Black students to thrive at a time in which Black students really need that. And I would say that the need has always been there, but since 2020, when we're talking about the racial reckoning that occurred, and I would say anti-Blackness is, we're probably experiencing it a lot more salient than we have in recent years. And so, I appreciate you, Professor Hill, just being an advocate for Black students. I know it's not just Black students, right? You would do that for all students, but I was just really moved by your remarks and your willingness to engage this body and sort of talk about why that's important to do. So thank you for your advocacy for that. Where do y'all want to start?
Let's start with that question of the schisms.
Yeah. Right,
And
right.
I'm going to call out Juan, who I think made such an important point a few meetings ago, where he was saying, were there issues about how the Umoja position came forward? Yes. Should we have the Umoja position? Yes. And so I think often, especially when we work in hierarchical structures, which is what any college is, we've got one set of structures that do one thing. But I think increasingly, and this is part of why the Senate was for this question, increasingly, we're in these positions where we can say yes and yes, but
Right.
how do you bridge yes and yes?
Yeah,
And how does that not become another rift?
for sure. Good question. And by the way, I'm not aware of, the sort of debate and dialogue and the details surrounding, what happened with the Umoja position. I'm glad to hear that, it was supported. But, Melanie, I think you used the word that really gets at the heart of the matter, is that sometimes we experience these disconnects and these impasses as individuals, right? I have a perspective in a position. You have a perspective in a position that's different from my perspective in a position. And a lot of times we experience these as it's me against you, as individuals or groups of individuals against groups of individuals. I think in those moments and situations, it's important to pan out and ask, what are the systemic policies and issues? What are the things that are kind of not about what an individual is doing per se, although that's an important part of the conversation. But are there systems and policies and structures that are putting us in this situation where it can't be a both and, where we have to make a decision that's going to alienate a group of students or a group of colleagues. And so sometimes it's really a matter of understand, like, I would imagine that there's some folks that say, yeah, I want to support this. I'm not opposed to this. But at the same time, the policy, the system, the structure says that this is how this has to go. And if we're following that, then in doing so, it means that we're not going to be able to support your position, your request, right? I mean, that's where I think things can get sticky and muddy. And so then the question is, do we have the agency as an academic senate for example, to question, reconsider, are there policies and things that consistently put us in this position where we're butting heads, right? When it comes to, one thing I know, when it comes to equity issues and concerns, there are a lot of policies and systems and structures at most institutions that are not aligned with what we want to do around equity, and right, because by and large, most of our institutions, none of our institutions really were designed to be equitable in the first place. And so there are, when we think about enrollment, or we think about hiring, I mean, there's all sorts of policies that have been with us for a long time that don't serve us well when it comes to equity. Even when we adopt equity and we recognize that equity is a really important institutional priority, given the current context, the policies and the systems don't always keep up with the needs of the students in the community. And so I think it's important, and it doesn't mean that sometimes you're not going to just come to the table and say, hey, let's change this policy. But I think in those moments, it's important to recognize, Frank, Melody, Frank is not that opposed to this, right? This is the policy. We got to separate, is it, am I opposed to the policy, or am I following the structure? And if it's about the structure of the policy, whatever it may be, what agency do we have to change and to reconsider it? That doesn't always mean that we're going to leave campus feeling better at that moment. But I think sometimes it gives us some understanding of what exactly are we trying to address, right? And then sometimes there will be opportunities where we say, well, we have this policy or we have these structures, but they can be changed. They can be reconsidered. We do, as faculty members, we do have some leadership. This does fall within our purview, and we can do something about this. And in those moments, I think it's important to do that, right? So I'll stop there. I feel like I'm, rambling. I would love questions, thoughts, and reactions to what I've shared so far. And I'm trying to be attentive to the person. Yeah.
Thoughts or comments from anyone? Does this lead you anywhere? Kathy?
I think, and I'm only speaking for myself, but I think most of us on campus, people I've talked to were very supportive of the Emoji program from the beginning. So I would hate to think that some of us might be, thought of that we were not in favor of that program. We voted for it as the Senate. I think that was really important. I think what's happened in some ways over the years is because we've had such a turnover in administrations that we've lost the consistency of understanding how things should work and how they worked in the past, and not consulting with the faculty bodies in a timely and appropriate manner, which then causes these problems. And that's not for everything, and I was not involved in all the details of this, but just looking at it as a longtime senator, I just don't think there was consultation that should have happened, which is the responsibility of the administration. And I think that has got us into a big mess. Yeah. And I feel very badly about that, because I think, we get emotional, we care, we're very intense. And sometimes it's hard to look back and say, well, how do we get ourselves here? It's like you get in a traffic accident and you wonder, what in hell did I do 2 miles ago that I could have prevented that accident? And I think sometimes we just don't do that very well. And like I said, the turnover administration, it's hard for all the new people to come in and understand how things work. Yeah. So I feel terrible that this all became an issue for us, because I really feel that everybody on this campus is very supportive of the Emoji program, at least anybody I've come in contact with. So I certainly can't speak for everybody, but I have never heard anyone say anything negative about supporting that program and that position.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that. This is why I'm a fan of, as an academic senate, because administrators will come and go. Right?
Around here.
That's the nature of administration, right?
Well, not
But-
usually around here.
Yeah.
Meetings was
especially in the last couple of years, right? I mean, last few years.
5 or 6 years.
But I think maybe there should be, so at the beginning of, I don't know how often it should happen, but maybe you all should say, okay, we're gonna look at our core policies. So our policies around hiring, our policies around maybe curriculum, right? The things that you know really have an impact on the operations of the college. They say, we're gonna look at them and just revisit them
Right.
periodically, every year, maybe we'll look at a different one each year, whatever, a different set every year. And just make sure, do we have alignment? Right? Equity is very new, the emoji is very new, not very, I mean, it's, the emoji probably, I know it's less than 20 years old, right? I mean, it's, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a long time, right? And so really asking ourselves as a Senate, are there policies that we need to revisit? Or do we really need to look at what it is we're doing? And just have a conversation about, are they serving us well in the present context? Right, given where we're as a college. There are, I think we can all agree, there are laws and rules and policies that were, the law of the land decades ago that are not good or weren't good after some time, right? For whatever reason. And that's not just about this particular, position. That's about
About everything.
everything we do, right? And it doesn't mean you need to look at every single one, but the big ones, right? And in that way, what that allows you to do is to start to have some dialogue and conversation before you actually have to enact it. And it doesn't guarantee anything. It doesn't mean that you're gonna have things are gonna be perfect and seamless. But it allows folks to know what it is that they have to do, what the process is, what are the expectations of, how this works before they actually have to do it. Because if not, right, and I can say this as a person of color who, has supported and developed programs like Emoji, the way that it comes across is not you specifically, or the Senate or the college is not supportive because it's a program that serves Black students, right? That's the way that it can be perceived. And that, that's hard to come back from, right? Once you get there. Again, no guarantees, but I think it does help.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We have two people
Oh,
on
yeah,
the,
sorry.
on the screen. That's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, is it Akil first and then Juan, or the other way around?
Zoom usually does it.
Zoom.
Order.
That's correct. Akil is first and
Yes. Hey, Dr. Harris, I was wondering, I have a question, if maybe you can talk a little bit about what does support actually means to Black students. I think we as institutions say, oh, we support Umoja or we support our Black students, but we don't see people in spaces. So there's a blind spot, and that has been occurring when we say that, oh yeah, we support. So no one's actively coming out and saying we don't support it. But in this case, with this position, was a little bit different because there were people that came out and said that they didn't want it to go. So I'm not talking about that case, but in other cases, as other institutions that you've been a part of and have done consulting work, can you talk a little bit about blind spots that institution has around Blackness that you've seen and how we can avoid that pitfall?
Yeah, let me start by saying there are very few places that I can point to that I say that they're doing an amazing job of supporting Black, right? I mean, this is a challenge for a lot of institutions. Not to say that that's an excuse that we should feel good about that either, right? But nobody, like I couldn't say, hey, go check out and look at what such and such college is doing, and they got it all right. I can't say that, but I can give you some tangible examples, right? Do you have, faculty and staff at the college that reflect the identities of the students, right? I mean, like a critical mass, and not just concentrated in particular areas, but are represented across the college, right? And your administration, your classified professionals, your faculty, your managers, and so forth, right? Even the board would be an example. When it comes to, is the success of Black students a real institutional priority? Do we only talk about it in our equity plan? Or do we only talk about it, once a year? Or is it something that is reflected in our larger conversations about what does it mean to be an effective and an excellent institution? Are we talking about the success of Black students in our governing board meeting, right? Are we talking about when we're looking at hiring and prioritization, right? Are we thinking about, hey, is there a way that this can be done that will help us advance successful Black students? When you talk with Black students, or when Black students articulate what does it mean to be a Black student at Santa Barbara City College, do they speak of experiencing a sense of belonging? Do they speak of feeling welcome? Do they have faculty and staff, not just Black faculty and staff, but faculty and staff who represent a range of identities that they can go to and feel as though that's somebody, there are folks that I can connect with that validate me, right? Those are some very tangible examples. Oh, one other I would add, are their lived experiences positively reflected in the curriculum? So when I read about Black students, Black people, Black issues that impact the lived experiences of Black folks in psych or in English or in chemistry, right? First of all, is there an opportunity to engage? And if there is there a positive representation of my identity when it happens, right? Or do I only get to talk about, Black students with, and sort of being Black folks being criminalized, or, all the sort of slavery, civil rights, that sort of thing, right? So those are, I would say, some very tangible examples. It's a clear institutional priority. Black students have relationships, positive relationships, feel a sense of welcoming and belonging, reflected in the curriculum, presence of Black faculty and staff. Those are, I would say that those are indicators of an institutional commitment to Black students. Now, again, right, I want to end where I started. No institution, right, that I've worked with, at least in California, is like checking all those boxes. Most places, including San Diego State, where I work, have a lot of work to do on most of those areas, right? But those would, if we're talking about, where are we, if we really are if we're serious about this, what should it look like and what should it be doing? That would be some examples. That's your question? Yeah.
All right, thank you,
I think it was,
Gil.
yeah.
All right,
President
and
Castillo. Oh, yeah, go ahead. So sorry.
I'm sorry,
No, go for it. I should let you direct traffic. Yeah.
all good.
Yeah.
One,
I'll ask my question first, and then I'll say basically the premise. It'll be the reverse. My question is, Professor, please study this case of selecting the Umoja counselor in our case. Why do I say this? This should be a case study for us ourselves to really analyze, to digest. Because in one hand, like Dean Evans said, this is how equity is supposed to look like, where a president of a university has to intervene to put something in place, which is in this case is a person that's going to bring equity. On the other hand, this president did not follow, protocol, but that president has the right to do that. But if it was done to my department, I would have a fit myself. So yes, this is a lot of entanglement. There are positions that are contradictory or appear to be contradictory. One department against the president's office. But if this is how equity is supposed to look like, then we are tearing down the barriers to equitize this institution. And so I think, we should really study what happened to us as a case in equitizing. So that's my question also to you. Please study this position, or bring examples of something like that where there's a conflict in that institution between different entities, both claiming that they have a right, but at the same time, I don't think they're working against each other if they really put their minds into it. I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, I think your last point really sort of hits it on, right? How do we, how do we respect policy and process? Especially when there's conflict in a way that doesn't make it seem like we're working, you got two entities working against each other. That's a big question. And that's why I always say, in those cases, you have to interrogate the policy and the process. What we tend to do is interrogate the individuals in the relationship, right? Because that's what we feel. That's what's most tangible. Even when we're talking about policy and process, there are people and individuals that are in some ways advancing policy and process, right? And so, but the reality is, once we get to that point where it's like, okay, is this about the policy and the process? Once we're at that point where we're kind of trying to work through that, we're already in some ways, behind the eight ball, right? And so I think, and again, I don't know the details of, what happened with the Umoja position. I really don't. But I think maybe there is an opportunity at some point to kind of revisit that, right, as a Senate leadership. It's okay, well, what exactly happened? What were the key issues there? How do we make sure we do everything we can to not be back in that same space? That we talk about, I think case studies probably a good way to think about it. Right? How do we not end up in that same place? And that's assuming there's a shared commitment to not end up in the same place, right? Which we can't take for granted. I would imagine that there are, there are probably colleagues who really question like anything with any equity, initiative or program. There's probably colleagues who don't really understand why you moved. Might not have been a simple, right? And then it wasn't just about policy, the process was all. But for a lot of folks, it might have been, right? And so unpacking that and kind of figuring out, how do we advance equity? Do we have to do advanced equity? Do we can do advanced equity? And make sure that our policies and what we're doing as a Senate allows us to do that. It's going to be important. And now I feel like I'm making sense. I'm not sure if I answered your questions.
You did, thank you.
Yeah.
Anna,
Hi, actually, my dog's about to bark, so I need a minute.
This says you needed a pen.
Yeah, I don't understand.
I'm sorry, can't. Anna, can you say-
Sorry. I said my dog started barking, so I needed a minute to go to a different.
Oh,
okay.
okay. Yeah.
I guess I wanted to bring the conversation back because I think the Umoja position is one example of the ways that this kind of continuously happens on campus, and really thinking about where you started with, like, does this align with our values? And I think there's this feeling that people want to distance themselves from the ways that, like, things happen, And there's often a lack of interest in taking responsibility for a misstep and trying to repair. And policies are often weaponized to not move forward in equity, particularly when it challenges the power that some of the people in these positions hold. And so I don't think that we're going to get anywhere if people aren't willing to engage in the real conversation, which is that some people are going to need to give up power. I'm not sure if folks are paying attention to the dynamic about who shows up in person and who doesn't, and the trends that's happening around campus related to that. This place hasn't felt safe for many of us for a variety of reasons. And I think unless folks are willing to listen and believe that maybe your personal actions aren't the ones that are causing this circumstance, but the reality is, I really tried to talk myself to come in person and I couldn't, because this conversation doesn't feel safe.
Thank you, and I don't, you know, I don't exactly know how to respond other than to affirm and thank you for just being vulnerable and transparent about how you're feeling. You know, even articulating just, you know, not feeling safe in a space with your colleagues right now. I mean, I think that's, you know, for me, even as an outsider, right, that's disheartening to hear. And I don't have the full history, right? I'm here visiting, but I can feel the tension. And I know that there have been times where I felt that way, you know, in my own campus. And so you know, all I did was affirm and thank you for sharing and hope, you know, if there's something that I can do, you know, as a part of my engagement with the college to help, not necessarily facilitating dialogue, right, per se, but kind of help move things forward. You know, I'd be willing to hear and consider that.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for that. I agree, it's a great thing to say. Ellen.
Well, first, hi, Dr. Harris. I'm glad you're here with us.
Hi, Ellen.
Okay. I'm going to try to articulate this as clearly as I can. One of the things I raised my hand to say actually also had to do with accountability and part of what Anna just touched on. And I think that we have a pattern on this campus, I think, of maybe differences of opinion about whether accountability has been taken in certain situations. And I think that just in observing this Umoja position situation, I think one of the things that for me makes me feel like accountability hasn't been taken is when I see lack of acknowledgement for all of the stages of the process. So I hear a lot of people today, but also at previous Senate meetings when, especially the October 12th meeting that I was asking about the minutes for earlier was the one where we had the most intense conversations about this and conversations about racism. So I think it's unfortunate that we don't have the minutes for that meeting yet, although the recording is on YouTube. So, so people who haven't seen it, who might be watching this one can watch that. But it's not, okay, so I'm also a librarian. So like information and factual information is important to me. It is not factually accurate to say that nobody opposed the Umoja position. There were faculty, some faculty in this collective room who advocated for pulling the position because of the complaints about the policy. That's not where we ended up, and I'm glad it's not where we ended up. I think that, so I guess what I'm saying is I can hold that both concerns about policy and procedure can be true, and the where we arrived at that this position is really important and needs to be filled regardless of those concerns about policy and procedure can be true. And I'm glad we came to that conclusion. But I think part of what is very frustrating and honestly feels like gaslighting, and one of the things I was going to ask was for more, maybe for you to talk more about race lighting, because it feels like that maybe that's what's going on too, when there are those of us who are asking for accountability for harm that was caused during a process, even if we arrived at sort of the right decision or whatever, people, some disconnect between, well, the right decision is the accountability versus if we're rewriting history and not acknowledging all of those stages in the process, that feels like gaslighting. So it is, I'm looking at an email right now when someone in this room was advocating in writing that the position be pulled. So, and I also hate quibbling over those facts, but I feel like that's what we end up doing. And what Anna was saying about policy being weaponized, then I think also things like facts are weaponized, and I hope I'm not doing that now, and civility is weaponized. And so I would like us to get to a point as an institution where we can say, whoa, yeah, I screwed up, and I responded in a racist way, and I have learned better, and I want to do differently now, rather than, oh no, that was never my intention in the first place. And so I'd love to hear your response to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, so to sort of kind of connect this to race lighting. Race lighting is when gaslighting happens in a racialized context, right? And one of the consequences of race lighting is racial battle fatigue, right? And those who may not be familiar with that concept, racial battle fatigue is what you feel when you are immersed in an environment in which chronic racism is. We experience chronic racism, right? You become, you know, hypervigilant. There might be some physiological symptoms, there's some psychological and cognitive symptoms of racial battle fatigue as well. One of the, so we talk about two types of race lighting. Active race lighting and passive race lighting. So active race lighting is when there's an active attempt to race light someone. And passive is when it's not an active attempt, but the outcome is still the same, right? The person on the receiving end of that is, you know, made to question, did I really experience what I thought I experienced? Maybe I'm the problem, maybe there's something wrong with me, right? It's when you start to internalize that doubt, internalize, you know, they start to blame yourself in some ways for being the source of the problem and the issue. So accountability is, you know, we talk about that also as a part of the race lighting framework. So one thing that does trigger race lighting is when you feel as though, you know, you experience racism, you're on the receiving end of it, and when you bring it to the person's attention, the response is one in which accountability is, you know, is apparent. And when you experience that over and over and over again, that's how you get to the racial battle fatigue. The other two consequences are stereotype threat and imposter phenomenon. Without making it super theoretical and psychological and so forth. And so was that, you know, the colleagues experience that as a part of this process, you know, only you all can say that, right? You know, I wasn't here, I wasn't a part of it. Perhaps so, right? It seems like probably so, you know, that's what I gather. The big question, the big takeaway from all of this is how are you all gonna move forward as an academic senate? Can you move forward as an academic senate? I know the position has been approved, right? And that's the outcome that seems to be, you know, what a lot of folks wanted, but a lot has happened to get to that point. What's going to happen to the colleague who gets to fill that position, right? You got to make sure, to a certain point, right? Those of us in this room, we have to sort of figure out, okay, not how do we get past this? That's, you know, that seems to trivialize the situation. But how do we get back to center? How do we get to a point where, you know, we can feel okay about, you know, where we are, we can feel like some accountability has happened, although, you know, I will say, whenever I've been on the receiving end of any sort of, you know, anything that felt racialized, I never feel as though, you know, a full accountability or reckoning happens, right? But you all have a new colleague who will join you when would this be, next fall, probably?
August.
In August. So you have a new colleague who's going to be in this position. That colleague, and you know, probably some other folks here are going to be responsible for supporting Black students. The success of those students is going to be a reflection of this institution, a reflection of everybody who's employed in this institution. Success, right, or lack thereof. And so my question, charge, I don't know what to call this, but yeah, question is, what are the things you all feel need to happen to, like, you know, I keep getting stuck on the word move forward, because that's what I want to say, but that doesn't feel like the right thing to say. And get past is certainly not the right thing to say, but somehow you all are going to have to work through this as a Senate in a way that's going to allow you to be a functioning body that supports this new colleague who's coming into this position, so that colleague can support the students who are going to be a part of that program, whose success is going to be a reflection of everybody in the room. And that's a big, again, I know that's easy for me to say, because I get to, you know, after I leave today, I get to go back home, but you all have to, there's some work that's going to happen. You know, obviously some relationships have been damaged. I don't know if this is sort of like, okay, the relationships that have been harmed were not in a good place before, or, you know, there's a lot underneath all this. But yeah, you know, could the race lighting framework help make sense of it? I don't know. I mean, if so, I'm happy to share it and happy to coach you all through that. But you all have some work to do, some interpersonal work to do as a Senate, because August is going to be here real soon. And what no one wants to happen, regardless of how we got here, no one wants this colleague to come into an environment in which they don't feel like they were supported, their position was supported, because that's going to impact what that colleague is able to do for the students. And the students deserve a quality experience, right? I mean, everything that we talked about earlier. And so that's, you know, y'all got some work to do as a Senate. A lot of work to do, and everybody's got some, not say everybody's responsible, but everybody's responsible. I forget, somebody said that, yeah. It's not that we're all responsible for the problem, but we're all responsible for helping to address and fix things. So I don't know. Professor, yeah.
That was a piece, Dr. Harris, that, I was trying to allude to earlier, is that we can't expect our students to feel like they belong here if we can't even belong with each other.
Right.
That trickles down. And I don't think people really understand the impacts of that. If I'm race sliding you, if I'm gaslighting you, but you can't communicate to me in a way that I can take that, then we stay stuck in neutral, right? We stay stuck in neutral because I don't want to hear anything that you got to say, because I may deem you as being toxic. You don't want to hear anything that I have to say, because, so again, like, we really have to really want success for people in their jobs and figure out a way that we can work this, because it impacts the student, right? And we don't think that it does, but it does trickle down in those spaces. So that was a piece that I'm saying that we have to figure out how we can actually meet on common ground and understand we're not always going to agree all the time. That's just the reality. The other thing too is, if you know anyone that that is qualified for the job, we're going to send you the job description. And so maybe you can pass it out to your network, because we want people in here that can do the job and feel supported. So I just wanted to say that before I forget. But yeah, I mean, we got to figure out the way to get past this, because it impacts the students,
Yeah, what I would say, the worst thing that could happen with this? You identify a colleague, they come here, and after a semester, they say, no way, I'm out.
Yeah.
This is not, I was really excited about this position, but this is not a good place for me. That wouldn't be a good outcome and that wouldn't reflect well on the institution. That wouldn't reflect well on any of us in this room. I'll include myself at this point. I feel like I'm part of the family now. I got to kind of come and break bread and part of it. But we got to get back to what is it that we agree on in terms of values and priorities. I think I really believe, and I might be naive, but I don't think anyone shows up, comes to campus or logs on and says, I'm here to try to make things difficult for students, and I'm here to, I still have to believe that everyone shows up in good faith, and we don't always get it right. Sometimes we get it wrong even when we do. But what are the shared values and connections? What are the things that we believe in? And how do we figure that out and start there? And the relationships that were harmed, how do we get to some restoration? How do we restore those things, right? But there has to be a commitment to do that. Art. I see Art and I see Jess.
Jess?
Go for it, Jess.
Oh, okay. I thought you said somebody else first. I agree with you. I don't think anybody's here trying to ruin anybody's day, but I do feel like oftentimes people we might have the same goals. We just have a different idea of how to reach that goal. And I think that's kind of oftentimes the problem. And I'm actually curious, because I struggle with the concept in general, on your thoughts of like, I guess I'll just, I don't want to use it as an example, but it's more recent, it's in my head, but the Umoja position. So if, because there was the talk about like race lighting or gaslight or whatever, so I guess I said I struggle with the concept. I'm trying to articulate it or figure out how to articulate it. But would the idea of opposing a position that supports Black students, do you think that the opposition is inherently racist, or does it go back to the idea that the opposition believes there's a better way or a different way that can achieve that goal of supporting Black students? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want it to seem like I'm not one of those individuals that I supported the position because it sounded like that was the best way to do it, but it's possible. I'm not even saying this is what others were thinking. I'm just using it as an example, but it's possible that someone can oppose something that is perceived to be great for any student, and they might be viewed as it might be viewed as bad, but their intentions are, hold on, wait, there's actually a better way. And that's my thought. Like, I don't want it to seem, yeah, I guess I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the opposition for something that was intended to support BIPOC students that's not inherently racist, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I understand your question. Beautiful family, by the way, because, yeah, could you, well, I mean, context always matters, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, theoretically, could you oppose an initiative or something that's designed to support Black BIPOC students and, oppose it for reasons that don't have anything to do with racism? Yeah, theoretically, of course. But how that opposition is received and perceived is all going to be impacted by the relationships, the institutional context, the history of BIPOC students being served and not served, right? It would be inadequate for me to respond to that question with, a simple yes. There's no simple yes or no, right? We always have to consider these issues within a larger context. Who's opposing? What has been the history of that person? And is this somebody who has always opposed stuff, right? For BIPOC students? I mean, there's a lot that comes with that.
So it's not inherently racist. It's just because there does require context and a better understanding on where they're coming from. And I think that's kind of where I'm trying to get. Like, I like that you said it depends on like the relationship, right? That's really important, because I've been like Ray was trying to, our previous Senate president was trying to get the school together to develop those relationships, because I do think it's important that you know me and I know you, because if let's say this was me and I went in and I was opposing something that was supposed to be in support of BIPOC students, you wouldn't immediately think, oh, Jess is racist. You would be like, I know Jess and I need to understand why he opposes this, because I know that I know his intentions are good. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's important. I guess to get back to it, I want to develop those relationships with the school, with all of the Senate members, with everyone, so that we understand each other better, so that we don't immediately jump to you're racist, because that shuts down the conversation, in my opinion.
One of the worst things you could be called as an educator is racist, right? I mean, so folks are going to, no one wants to be branded a racist. Right, of course.
But I do agree that like sometimes yeah, like it happens and it needs to be called out. I'm not saying that that shouldn't be the case, but I do think it's important to have conversations before that conclusion is made, I guess.
Yeah, and this is why I go back to where we started. I almost, and this is, I'm not saying anyone needs to adopt this perspective. But when I'm kind of helping to work through, I don't know if one of the many jobs I have at San Diego State is I'm Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the College of Education. So I gotta work through and, kind of, help colleagues, engage colleagues on issues like this almost every day. One thing that I find helpful in doing my job as Associate Dean of DEI is I try very hard not to get in, I try not to engage the question, is this person a racist or is this person not? And I really, really try hard to focus on the issue, the policy, and if something is giving us racially inequitable results, then I really try hard not to trace that back to a person or an individual, and really try to trace that back to policies and structures. I try hard to do that. Now, I've been at San Diego State 16 years. Are there colleagues who I know have a history of making decisions and advocating for things that consistently give us racially inequitable outcomes? Absolutely. I still try hard not to call that person a racist. Right? Because I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe that, I gotta believe that no one shows up to do their job and think, hey, I'm gonna show up and be a racist. I mean, I don't know. And maybe it's just a mental mind trick I have to play with myself to actually do this job. Because if I don't think about it that way, then I would not be able to be effective in the role. Right? Now, I'm not saying anybody here should adopt that as a perspective or position. I'm just sharing a strategy that I use to try to work through these issues and sort of coach folks through them. It doesn't always work. I don't always get the outcome that I want or that I hope for. I don't. I usually do, but not always. I think sort of the big thing, I'll say this, and then I think we can probably, I know we have two more comments and we'll take these two and we'll see if there's other things to talk about, but I forgot what I was going to say as I was getting us to wrap up. If it comes back to me, I'll say it later. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is this. You're probably not going to find it all that helpful to call folks racist, say this person's racist, this person's not racist. Whether you're right or wrong, it's probably not going to help you solve the problem. So what I would say is focus on what's giving you the racially inequitable outcome. And so as I say that, some folks would think, well, yeah, if it wasn't for this person, right? But systems, policy, structures, because in all honesty, those are the things that we have the capacity to change. If somebody is racist in their perspective, or, and upbringing, we're probably not going to change that person's perspective in the time that we have to really engage with anyway. But then I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
I would say Anna and Jen, and then I think we can, I don't know how we're on time. Oh my God, wow, okay. Yep, Anna and Jen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that since we keep coming back to the Umoja position, the Umoja department has consistently been unsupported. We have had a revolving door of program advisors in that department. So this position is again just a symptom of the systemic anti-Blackness that is present on our campus. And what I wish we could all walk into our campus doing is recognize that working at a higher ed institution that is structured the way it is, we all will operate in racist ways because the structure is set up that way. So rather than taking things personally and trying to distance ourselves from how we uphold racism, it would be so refreshing to be able to say, damn, this policy is racist. How can we shift that? I don't feel good affirming this policy because it makes the system work in a racialized context that disproportionately impacts Black students and also other students of color, right? The other piece that I think is important to name is that oftentimes when these discussions come up, people want to point to civility. People want to point to making sure that people are receiving the feedbacks comfortably. And I always want to bring us back to the characteristics of white supremacy and challenge us all to really think about whose comfort are we prioritizing always. If I say something in a way that probably right now, people are receiving this as aggressive and accusatory, so it doesn't matter the way I say things, people receive it a certain way, especially from me because of the reputation that I have on this campus already. And when we talk about civility and delivering messages in ways that are comfortable to people who already get to move in the most comfortable ways on this campus, that frustrates me.
Well, you always have a way of dropping the mic, you know. Usually I'm pretty good at responding to comments, but you know, all I can say is, yeah, I mean, I applaud everything you said. Thank you.
Maybe people hearing you validate me will give me a little more credibility around here.
Jen?
Jen,
Yeah, I just want to add that we need to acknowledge the work that's being done by the people who are tirelessly proposing this Umoja position, who are writing our student equity plan, who know what we need to help our Black students, other students of color, and who are telling us what we need to do. And I think that we owe that trust of just saying, yes, this is what we're going to support. So when this position is filled, yeah, I mean, I thank you so much for saying that about what we need to do when we hire this person. We need to unequivocally support them, support their ideas, their proposals, their, you know, that's what we have to do, is throw our enthusiasm and our commitment behind these positions, or we are just going to keep losing really valuable people.
yeah, thank you, Jen. There's this concept called cultural taxation. Have you ever heard of it? It's where typically when you have work that's happening at an institution that's focused on racial equity, you know, racial equity, gender equity, right? Any type of equity work is typically the folks who share those marginalized identities that's like doing a lot of the work, right? Or allies also that's doing a lot of the work, to a point where you get sort of tired and bogged down, right? And you get kind of taxed, you get emotionally and cognitively taxed, right? And a lot of what you experience looks a lot like what race like, right? The battle fatigue, the sort of feeling like, man, I can't, I'm afraid to show up in this space in person because I don't feel, I don't feel like I'll be well received. I don't feel safe. Like a lot of what, we've heard today. And so I would say, I think, Jen, your point about not allowing the important work that has happened, not only to get this position, this remote, and we talked a lot about the remote position for good reasons, but I'm sure there's also other things, other similar efforts that are happening. And I would imagine that it's a lot of the same folks that are championing these efforts. And so, my hope for you all is that, you can appreciate, you can affirm, we can acknowledge the folks that's doing the work. For those that maybe haven't been, I'm sorry, for those that haven't been, if they haven't been as involved, maybe there's a way, this is an opportunity or maybe an invitation to get more involved. And so again, right, the question is this a place where somebody who's committed to Black students and, running a Umoja program, if they have the opportunity to work here or somewhere else, why would they choose here? Right? And so that speaks to institutional culture. And it's the folks in this room that help to create and sustain the culture of the institution. Right? So we got a role to play.
All right,
Yeah.
we've got Akil, do you want to do one?
Akil,
last
you wanna-
topic?
yeah.
And then we'll move on to the second topic.
Yeah, I just want to say one last thing in regards to, our institution. And, while like you said at the beginning, Dr. Harris, that all institutions are grappling with this. I think it's
Oh, yeah.
also important as a Black person that can speak on this about the anti-Blackness of the institution. I will say that I do feel, and I have spoken with other Black colleagues, that the institution is trending in the right direction. So while I just don't want the narrative to always be out there about our institutions anti-Black, yes, we have problems. Don't get me wrong. We do have problems and we have things that we need to address. We also got to recognize that we got a Black VP in HR. We got our top administrations. We got Black representation there that we've never had before. So we are trending in the right direction. There's still a lot of work that we still need to do, but we got to also celebrate the small victories too, and stop living in the space of like nothing's being done, because that's not accurate. It's just simply not accurate.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope I didn't, I hope my opening remarks wasn't suggesting that nothing was being done like that. By no means did I want to convey that.
Yeah.
And I don't get the sense that that's what's happening here, right? But so yeah, I appreciate you sharing that.
Thanks.
Yeah,
All right, so let's move on to that second question
all right.
that we had.
It was about hybrid. How do we want to, what courses should we offer? Hybrid, online, face-to-face, what's the best way to start that?
And can I throw in one, I know we don't
Yeah.
have a ton of time, but a thing that I'm really struggling with. We talk about this a bit in the English department, it came up from students, College Planning Council. In the modality question, now that we're back to face-to-face, which for many students is a really effective way to learn. Some people aren't changing some of their expectations, like if a student can't make it to class, oh, they just missed class. But if they're sick, if they gotta take care of a family member, their excuse, so how do we support that? So I feel like that's sort of part of the modality question for me, like I feel like things have sort of changed and we haven't kept up with that change as far as recognizing what students need, especially to do that thing.
Like we're back to, it's almost like the pandemic didn't happen.
Yeah, right, oh, you come twice a week, every class,
Right.
No, if you're sick now, you're like supposed to stay home.
Right,
And people used to come sick because they didn't want to miss class, right?
yeah.
Yeah, and there was also, I think this really emerged towards the end, and I think it's one of Jen's points in our last meeting when we discussed your visit, was we don't have it right yet. We haven't figured out what the right proportion is. It's just not right yet. So if you know of other schools that are struggling with this, right, it's always nice to know we're not the only ones that are doing this, or maybe you know of some schools that have figured out something, some way of dealing with this, and then always the question of how do we serve the most disproportionately impacted students, especially as we're putting together schedules.
Yeah, good questions. Well, I think we have to answer this also in light of what's happening statewide with enrollment. Right, so we know a lot of, I don't know what the case is specifically here, but we know a lot of our colleges in the state are, some have lost 20% of their enrollment since before the pandemic. And so that has to be part of the conversation is what can we do that's going to be in the best interest and service of and to students? That's also not going to allow us to continue to get slammed with our enrollment decline. And this is very important, when we look at declining enrollments across the state, it's Black, it's Indigenous, like it's the underserved students that tend to be those who haven't been enrolled, right? Especially males of color, by the way, it's very salient with males of color, men of color, I should say. So what I've heard, I've done some student focus groups recently at some other places. What students seem to like is high flex. You all familiar with high flex? So they like the option of being able to attend in person if they can, but if somebody's sick, if they're sick or they got to take care of a family member, they want to be able to attend online. Like that's the sort of ideal situation, right? Every class we know can't be high flex. Some classes have heavy lab time involved, and so those considerations have to be taken. But I would say, to the extent that you could offer the most flexible options to students. Well, that doesn't sound good.
No.
Yeah. That would be ideal. Now, high flex is a lot of work for faculty. I don't know about you all, but I find it a lot easier to just show up. So the in-person is easiest for me. And, online Zoom would be second. High flex is probably the hardest.
Yeah.
Right, because you have to be able to engage.
This is high flex.
This is high flex.
And this,
right?
people there feel left out, people here, which the people there were part of here.
Right,
It's not great for anyone, but it sort of works for everyone.
but you have to adjust your instruction, you have to adjust engagement, so you may have to provide some PD for faculty around, it's not just, go do high flex, but what are some, I hate the word best practices, but what are some good strategies if you're going to do it? What are some sort of things that you should take into consideration to engage both your online audience and your in-person audience? Recording, right? It's always good to have, whatever you do, have it recorded. Some students might not make it. Somebody's Wi-Fi might crash in the middle, right? But that seems to be, at least as a good starting point, where students can say, I'm not sure that this is the best time for me to be in school. I don't know that I can manage this.
Yeah.
But this gives me the most amount of confidence to feel like this is something that I can kind of manage. That's a start. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of questions and concerns. And by the way, this is not I'm not an expert in this. I'm just sharing what I've heard from talking with students, across the state let's say the last 6 months.
And I know Joy has something to say. I just want to go, this is from the institutional research webpage. It's under college facts on their drop-down menu. Fall 2021, we had 4,939 students on the main campus. fall 2009, we had 16,180.
That was boom.
It was the boom time, right?
You said
Exclusive,
2009?
Yeah.
yeah, and then exclusively online in fall 21, 6,859. Exclusively online fall 2009, 2,360, difference of 13,781 versus 20,232. And this semester is gone down even more.
What's gone down more? How many?
We're down to about, what are we, 11, around 11,000 students
Total.
right now, total.
That's head count or FTE?
I think it's 10,
10-5.
10-5.
We saw yesterday in the budget.
Is that total head count or FTS? Total
I
head.
think it was. Oh, head count. Maybe
I
not.
think
Maybe
it's
it was
FTE,
FTE. The file Maria.
Yeah, Maria, which is it? 10,500 and head count or FTES?
Actually, it's both. It's just happens to coincide that the head count is very, very similar to our FTES.
Oh, wow.
Okay, right, thank you. All right, so I know that you had a comment, so I just wanted to give you some statistics.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm teaching this semester in person, online and hybrid. And I'm struggling with students who sign up for one modality and want to try to make it into another modality. And then come and go from that. And I do know that nothing is going to go back to the way it was. But Saturday, I teach art history. I took a group to the Getty Villa after we had studied Greek and Roman art. I had nearly 100% participation. The vibe was so great.
Yeah.
They got to see physically what we had studied, went around with the worksheet. Everybody wore masks on the bus and we wouldn't be a super spreader thing. It was good. And so I just don't want to lose that. It was good.
Right.
And I really care deeply about my students' success. I only want the best for them, but it's hard for me to think that they're slacking off. And it's like, I just gotta go home. I had this one student that said, the rent's so high here, I just need to finish the course back east. And it's like, well, it's an in-person class. And so how do we behave equitably when we really do have the best in mind for our students? Knowing that there's value in showing up as being a part of the group too.
Yeah, and quick sidebar, I don't think anyone realizes how hard art history is until you actually have to take an art history class. To memorize, you took me back to my,
No,
yeah, but no, it's.
yeah, not too much
That's
memorizing.
You know, I mean, the fact of the matter is, you know, we're at record inflation. Rent, food, everything is expensive. So students are struggling and making choices that is maybe in the best interest of themselves and their family, but not necessarily in the best interest of, you know, their education. But right now we're in a time where it's a privilege to be able to exclusively prioritize school.
Yeah.
You know, that's a privilege that is, well, let's be honest, it's never fully been the case, right? Students have always had to work through these difficult decisions. It's just been exacerbated by pandemic, record inflation, and everything that has come with that. And so I'm not saying that we should just accept that as a reality, but we need to recognize that that's a part of what students are working through. And if in some cases, you know, you're not always going to be able to solve the problem, but always knowing what resources you have available for students, if there's an opportunity to work with them and be flexible with them, you do it. Recognizing that there's nothing you can do to recreate the experience you just articulated, right? You hope students can do it. Maybe there's a hybrid option where not every session is in person. So, you know, you have mostly online, but you got, okay, on October 29th, we're taking a field trip and you know, I need everybody to the extent possible. You know, I mean, we just gotta, it's kind of like,
So
it's like a construction project, right? It's like we got our dream, you know, hey, this would be the dream, but you know, the budget is this, so we gotta work within that.
You're saying maybe
Yeah.
just reprioritize the struggle of not being able to prioritize school and try to be as flexible as possible.
You
And
try,
that's your
right.
emphasis on high flex or things like.
you try, but I also understand you gotta teach our history, right? And students have to learn our history, and so there's some basic core things that have to happen for that learning to happen. You can't, you know, obviously on those things, you can't throw away those things, right? I mean, those, you know, it's like you gotta know when you see the statue, you gotta know the difference between Michelangelo's David and Donatello's.
Right.
And
Well,
there's
I
certain
mean,
things you
there are
gotta
other
know.
important things in life, but I guess
Yeah.
if I'm being totally honest, sometimes my struggle is. I want to believe the student, but sometimes it feels like they're taking the easy choice.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
so I want to be discerning and not enabling in a negative way. I know that word is.
yeah,
problematic,
no,
but-
I struggle with this too. 90, I want to sound naive here, but I believe this. I feel like 90% of the people follow the rules and, you know,
Yeah, the
do it with
big deal.
integrity.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be 10% that gets over for whatever reason, right? And so I try not to punish the 90% for the 10%. I really try not to. Now, those aren't like exact, I mean, you know,
And you're in a four-year school.
I'm at it, and I have rights.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
You're in a four-year school.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, you do what you can, you know, the next 3 to 4 semesters is gonna be recalibrating, trying things. It's almost like you're teaching for the first time again. And you're kind of designing and figuring out what's gonna be the best way to teach it. It's like we're all, you know, first, second year instructors. So I didn't even turn my backyard. And so I would, you know, just accept that. If you have colleagues in your department, you can work with together on these things. If you can co-teach, maybe it's like, okay, you know, we combine our classes at times. But I think there's going to be some new tools and strategies and things that we'll discover and have to try over the next 3 or 4 semesters. And we're not going to really know what sticks and what works well, probably for a couple of years, but we have to look at the data, right, Maria, and kind of study what's happening and all the way down to the section level of our courses. And just really get a lot of feedback from students, more than we've ever gotten before about what's working for them, what's not. I think the enrollment, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Unfortunately, as you know, if the economy dips and worsens, we know a lot of folks are going to be coming back to school to retool. I'm not hoping the economy. I'm hoping the economy can sustain itself. But if it doesn't, we have to be prepared for students to come back. And these are going to be working adults. These are going to be folks who've been in the workforce for a while. I mean, you know, we've seen this. You've been in community college as long as I have. We've seen these waves before. You know. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got Kim and then Anna.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay.
No, but we have Kim had her end up.
Okay. Coming to you next time.
So I just wanted to share, I think, as we're all kind of adjusting, we're all exhausted too.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
like, and so there's this feeling of like, oh my gosh, PD on high flex, shoot me now, you know, I can barely do my regular job.
Right.
So I have talked about this with my colleagues a little bit in the English department, and I got the idea from Darren in communication of low flex. So like, I'm doing like a adequate way of sharing the class. So like if a student can't come in, I'm teaching at the main thing. I just put them on Zoom on my laptop. And guess what? They can hear everything. We can hear them talk. When we do group work, I can put them into the group with the other person needed Zoom, or if they can't, I put them like on a dash so what it did for me, gave up some perfectionism and said, hey, this way the student can still participate. They hear what we're talking about. And then it works. And then it's also easy to record it. And so if somebody can't come because they literally aren't free then either, not just because they're sick or their car broke down or they're taking care of a family member, they can then watch the recording. And so that's been so far, has been really working, and the students are really appreciative. So, but taking that pressure off on having to do it really well before you do it.
Yeah, and we're all of us, right? We're all professional educators, and so we are accustomed to kind of hitting a certain standard for ourselves. But this is new for a lot of us, and that's why I like the cheat sheet idea. I shouldn't call it a cheat sheet, but here's some tools and strategies, right? If you got a high flex class, here are 10 things you can do to make sure that it has some desired impact, right? Short TikTok videos, YouTube videos, right? So maybe it's not a full day of PD, but it's you sprinkle nuggets of information here and there where folks where it's accessible and folks can use it and find it helpful.
Anna?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think this is a much bigger thing that higher education needs to reckon with, as a whole, and really students needing to understand the value of being in college and what the benefits are. I think about our education system and when it was designed and the purpose and history of why it was designed that way. And how a lot of the ways that we teach are not, supporting students who are neurodivergent, who have different needs, because our education system was developed with a very specific purpose in its creation, right? And for the most part, we have not evolved. So I think this is a moment for us as educators to really think about how are we getting students to see the value in education, and how are we teaching them in ways that they can learn, rather than problematizing them because they won't acquiesce to whatever it is that we're asking of them.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. We talked about this a little bit earlier about relevance, really helping students see how is everything they're doing going to be relevant to their lives or to their careers. How is it going to lead to jobs and careers that pay livable wage, right? I mean, there is a larger conversation to be had about the enrollment decline. Yeah, I would concur with a lot of what you shared.
Jen, you had your hand up. But now it's gone away? Yes, okay, it's still gone away. All right. Ellen?
Yeah, the thing about relevance and what Anna just said made me think about an article I read recently. I think I'm gonna have the title right, which is Curiosity is the Luxury of the Financially Secure. And it doesn't fully do justice to the research study itself, which was conducted by librarians. They did focus groups with students who had research assignments, and to try to assess the challenges that students. This was community or students at a community and technical college, and so they wanted to assess sort of the barriers around research assignments in particular, but that title really struck me, and really made me think of the ways, and I see a lot of research assignments because I'm helping support other classes with research workshops, but also in my own Library 101 class, I see that a lot of our assignments have sort of not been updated to be relevant to the current information landscape. And all of our students are going to be navigating that information landscape, no matter where they go in career or education. And yet many of our, most of our assignments, research assignments, I would argue, the ones that I see, are really geared toward the students who are going to not only go on and transfer, but maybe go into academia and really need to be engaging with and writing scholarly sources as their one of their primary modes of communication. And so anyway, it's not like the best article in the world, but that title just really grabbed my attention, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot in terms of not just research assignments, but all of the things. Are we just giving a hoop for a student to jump through when they have kids to take care of and 2 jobs to go to and the high rent in Santa Barbara? Or are we giving them meaningful assignments that are actually not only going to help them learn the course content, but serve them with the critical thinking that they will be able to apply in their lives in other ways?
Yeah, curiosity is the luxury of the financial security, the effective thresholds of information literacy.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll make sure I give it a read, but yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to, and it's not just in community college. I think we all need to do a better job of this when we're talking about university students and even graduate students. But I think most students, for better or worse, kind of approach and see their educational experience through almost a consumerist kind of lens. And so they do expect, they're expected in return on their investment. And not just the financial investment. I think in a lot of ways, it's the investment of time away from family, the opportunity costs. Or if I'm in school, that means I'm working less. And so I do think we have I personally have always kind of rejected the consumerist argument, right? But I do think I feel like I have some responsibility to help my students connect what it is that what they're doing, they're learning, the time that they're spending with me, to what they'll be doing when they're in the next phase of either their education or their career. I feel that.
I struggle with that too, because I also reject that consumerist argument. And especially as a librarian, like all the information, the vast majority of the information we encounter is presented to us and based in capitalism. It's like, it's different. So yeah, I have a lot I could say about that, but I think that article really makes some important points about challenging our sort of attachments to removing ourselves from that consumerist approach, if that's where our students are coming from.
Yeah, and then the other thing I'll say about this, and Jen, I see you next. So we also have to remember this. I have to remind myself of this all the time. Like, I intentionally chose a career as a professional educator. So learning for the sake of learning, like, yeah, that's kind of that was sort of my thing, right? A lot of us probably feel the same way. Most of our students are not, like, they want to learn things that's going to help them do something, right? They want to know, okay, how is this going to help me do my job better? How's it going to improve my life? How's it going to get me to UC Santa Barbara if that's my next step, right? And so I think, I can't believe I'm saying this, but starting to sound like my dad or somebody, but like learning for the sake of learning.
That's a learned talent.
Yeah, that is a privilege in a lot of ways, right?
It is.
Because what's our most valuable, our and our students' most valuable resource? Students don't have enough what?
Time.
Time.
Yep.
students have enough time, right? Yeah, none of us,
Biggest
yeah.
gap we have is time.
So the worst thing we can do is have students feel as though we're wasting their time. Jen and then Anna. And I'm not missing anybody.
Well, I keep doing this because I feel like I could talk about this for 5 hours more.
Yeah,
But since you just brought up time, and time management is also, I think, a thing that our students really struggle with. So I struggle as in setting expectations. And this, I go back to what Joy was saying about giving the option of being there versus not being there. When I have deadlines for assignments, I want to be flexible because I know there's so much going on in people's lives. And then I want to also be kind of a little bit like, oh, you got to get this done. You got to get it done by this time, because I know that it does a disservice to students to just say, oh, well, turn it in whenever you can. And if you turn everything in at the end of the semester, I'll grade it for you. I don't think that that's helping our students learn the skills that they need to be successful. And to a large extent, I think less so than the content of my courses, the actual time management and communication and those skills that go along with successfully completing assignments is so important. So that's something I struggle with is that balance of flexibility and keeping everybody, making sure that we're on task and that we are keeping on top of things. So I don't know if you have any insights about that.
Yeah, I have a colleague too who's really good at explaining this, but it's this what I try to do is you design the class to where there's deadlines, but the flexibility is built into the design, to where you don't feel as though you're changing a rule or a policy to accommodate, right? So it's almost like, okay, you can turn in any of these assignments within this turn-in period, right? And maybe that turn-in period is 3 weeks, right? And then you have another turn-in period, which is another 3 weeks. So right now, you got 3 weeks, but you got to get it in those 3 weeks. If you miss that window, then I can't go back and, right, things pile up on you, right? And so I would try to the extent possible, build the flexibility into the design of the class so that you don't feel like you're making an exception and you're still reinforcing some of those critical skills. Follow through, meeting your deadlines, right? Et cetera, et cetera. But at a certain point, and I know what you're getting at, Jen, at a certain point, you're like, okay, I can only go so far in terms of, allowing you to turn something in, late if that's what you're requesting. And so I would sort of, figure out what that sweet spot is for you in your particular class. But sometimes we create anxiety for ourselves because we have strict deadlines. And sometimes we need those strict deadlines, but sometimes those deadlines are more about us than it is about student learning, right? And so I think we gotta ask ourselves, okay, is this deadline here because it needs, like, if you don't do this assignment and you're not able to have the learning you need to do the next one, right? Or is it because I just need it done because I need it done at this time? That's the way I've always done it, right? I mean, kind of teaching out those things.
Actually get grades done.
That's I think that would be an important part. But I'll make sure I share with Melody. I'm gonna find out. I have a colleague who's really good at kind of has all these rules and policies around grading that are flexible, but still, you gotta adhere to them. But it's much more in line with what I think students need, in the current context.
I want to leap in there for just a quick minute.
Yeah.
And if anyone's interested, I can send you this out. I come up with this thing I call flexible deadlines. And so that's what it's called. It's a flexible deadline, which doesn't make any sense except students love it. There's 3 days where they get extra points for handing it in ahead of time. And then there's an eventual day it's due. I can't even tell you how much they love this, right? So let's say you really want it on, I don't know, Thursday, but you give them extra points if they get it on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. The amount of them that actually get it in on Thursday has skyrocketed. If I just said it's due on Thursday, it comes in 4 days late.
Now,
So
is that extra credit points you give?
those are extra credit points. They're, anyway, it's just an idea and they just, I don't know, it's like candy. And it's like, if you really want to do it a three, you know, if you want a few extra points and you really want to get it in on Wednesday or whatever, it makes them happy. I saw Anna has
Yep.
her hand up. Sorry, Anna.
Go for it, Anna.
No, that's fine. My comments were more related to kind of conversation just prior to this piece of it, but I guess I just want to invite us to think about again the onus that we're putting on students to adjust themselves to our methodologies and what we want to do with our teaching, and how that kind of limits, I guess, this process for students, right? When we talk about, I'm an educator and I want students to be engaged in learning for the sake of learning, and you're unwilling to adapt your teaching to the different needs of our students as generations change and technology changes and all of these things, are your students learning what you're teaching, right? It's a two-way street. And I just want to emphasize that all of that responsibility should not be on students, and that we have a responsibility as educators to make sure that we are adapting our practices to match what our students need to actually learn, right? To create environments that are actually fostering learning. And I think keeping in mind that, you know, we are at a community college and students, oftentimes many of the classes and things that they're taking are check boxes for them, right? So we don't need to educate students to be experts in our discipline, you know, in this process. And it kind of brings me back to what Kim was talking about regarding like letting go of some of that perfectionism and expecting a student to come out as an expert in our class. That's unrealistic. Most people can't master every single subject, right? So if we have expectations, but also create space for people to show up as they are, most people are average, right? And so like if we could normalize that an average amount of learning is better than nothing, then that might change some options too. And I'm not saying, you know, don't expect from students the things that to push them and to encourage them to grow and all of these things, but I'm just saying not everyone is an A student, and that's okay. And students, you know, there needs to be some leeway to create space for people to feel okay about the C if that's what they earned, right? For whatever reason, whether that be because they didn't attend the class as much as they did, or maybe they didn't retain as much of the material. So yeah, and then, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, 2 quick points. Yeah, I actually, it was me that said that made the learning for the sake of learning comment. I was actually saying it's important for us as professional educators to let go of that. If that's what motivated us, that shouldn't be our expectation for our students. So I just wanted to be clear about that. I do agree. Learning should be the primary goal in any educational experience that we're designing for students. The third thing I want to say, this is going to be hard, but I'm able to do this. Again, I have graduate students, so I have mostly graduate students. So this may or may not work for everybody, but what I found helpful is I don't grade individual assignments. I get feedback on the individual assignments, and I just do a final grade at the end. And I have students share with me, okay, what grade do you think you've earned in this class? Tell me what you've learned, and so on and so forth. And typically, they're actually a little bit harder on themselves than I would be. Like, okay, well, you know, Frank thinks he deserves a B plus. I actually think Frank deserves an A minus. And so, to your point, Anna, I often find that sometimes the letter grade or earning a grade, in some cases can be a barrier to learning. Because if you remove this sort of cookie at the end, I think sometimes it allows students to be more focused on, okay, I don't have to worry about the grade so much. Let me really focus on learning art history, right? And demonstrating that I know this, and not so much, you know, am I a C art history student or am I A art history student? So if that's an option. And if I were teaching, sorry, go for it.
Sorry, I was just gonna say thank you for better articulating what I was getting at. That I think sometimes the emphasis becomes the grade and not the learning, and that creates a state for students that inhibits learning.
Yeah. No, thank you.
All right,
All right, are we already at the end?
we are at 5. Can we have a round of applause? Nothing like a discussion that ends with teaching, with everyone having ideas for how to make us better teachers, being interested in being better teachers. It's such a hard job. It's such a rewarding job. It's such a hard job, right? Thank you so much, Dr. Harris, for all of your ideas. Thank you for the participation from everyone on Zoom. We have 2 more Senate meetings, November 30th. Our post Thanksgiving meeting, and we were going to, or we had the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Yeah, so we went for that one. We went for the 30th, and then December 14th. Thank you so much, everyone. Motion to adjourn. So seconded. I'll second. Seconded. All right. And
Yeah, and thank you all for having me. Thank you so much. You know, I know we had to talk about some challenging things, but I really enjoyed my time with you all, and hope this is the last time
yeah,
I get to join you. So thank you for having me so much.
we would love to have you back.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
everybody on Zoom.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Can I ask you a question?
Thank you.
of course.
Okay.